Well, bonjour, welcome everyone. I'm Julie Bird Clark, president of ACLA, and I also am with my vice president. I'll let him say his name.
Hi, I'm Joël Thibault, vice president of ACLA.
Thanks, Joël. We are really pleased, ACLA, to welcome and present our fall symposium. Yet another fascinating and exciting topic that I think you'll all find engaging. Today, we welcome Angelica Galante, who is our member at large, and she has organized this panel. It is on our plural pedagogical approaches in digital spaces. So I just like to go through really quickly and just go over the titles and the names of the presenters and welcome each of them. This is the organization of the panel, Trans-semiotizing in the Eco-Social System of Online Language Teaching with Angel Lin and Qinghua Chen from Simon Fraser University. Then we have Languaging through Online Plurilingual Action-Oriented Scenarios, Teachers' Perceptions and Involvement by Enrica Piccardo from OISE. Next, we have Engaging Language Learners' Full Linguistic Repertoires through Plural Pedagogical Approaches in Digital Spaces as Counter-Narratives to Address Real-World Problems by Shelley Taylor from my own university, Western. And then we have, last but not least, we have Angelica Galante, and she will be presenting Enacting Plurilingual Pedagogy in Digital Spaces and Through Different Languages. And then after the presentations, we'll have time for quick questions and answers, questions and responses. And while we are doing the presentations, I'd just like to remind everybody a little bit of Zoom etiquette in case you're not familiar. Just during the talk, if you could please kindly keep your video and sound off. You can certainly give reactions to presenters to let them know you really like what they've said or you've loved and support what they're talking about. You can use thumbs up and have clapping hands features or heart. You can even have laughing if you want, if you find it humorous. And then after the talk, we'll do a question and answer, 15 minutes for discussion. You can post your questions in our chat room, or you can unmute your microphone and ask a question. Just be sure to use your raising hand feature so we can see you, because I think there are about 90 participants here today. Our recording, the whole panel will be recorded. Except for the discussion afterward. We will be posting the recorded talk. It will be available on the ACLA website through our YouTube channel. And you just have to subscribe to receive notification, but you'll be able to access the recording there. I just want to say thank you to all the presenters. And also just to remind everyone, we are going full force to participate in Congress 2022 this year. The Congress will be fully online, and we are excited to be able to participate in this year's Congress. So if you have not yet renewed your membership, please make sure to do so. As always, we welcome and we thank you for all your support. And without further ado, I pass the parole on to our first presenter. Merci beaucoup. And thus, Angelica, you have a few words you'd like to say before we begin.
Not really. We can get started. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
I hope everyone can see our slides now, right? So the topic of our talk for today is reconceptualizing the semiotic resources in the eco-social system of an online language tutoring course. This is the course that I have been doing, teaching online to students in China. They are working towards getting a degree in a university in Canada or in the US. And first, I would like to talk about the theories behind this talk. So it is important to take a look at a few theoretical concepts that inform this study. So first, from Lemke, an eco-social system is a system of interdependent processes. It's an eco-social a socio-technical network that is described by saying like what is going on, what is participating and how. And especially how one going on is interdependent with another, especially in the digital spaces or in the online teaching scenario that I'm going to share later. And also Lemke explained how processes at different time scales can affect the activities being observed at the focal level. The focal level here means it's where our research attention is focused on. For example, if we are analyzing a session of synchronized teaching online, even though we are discussing issues that is happening within this session, there are a lot of other things that are going on that have direct or indirect effects on the phenomenon that we are observing or studying. Also, Lin Wu and Lemke describe how the dynamic process of meaning making sees no boundaries of language and across different semiotic resources. So I will also begin by moving from the synchronized session. So I will first introduce the eco-social system that is actually going on while I was teaching. So this is the tool, an online teaching application. It's kind of a typical one. There are many softwares like this that would support similar functions, more or less. So in this picture, you can see that at the top, there are tools for slides display, just like what we're doing now. So we can do some grafting, typing, drawing, or pointing to things that we think is important, and even play multimedia resources. And sometimes we can set up assessments work and ask students to answer questions that we have. We have the slides display. There's also a log of the previous chatting and also a chat box for the communication between the teacher and the students that supports emoji or even screenshots. And the teacher have the full control of like who can go online and whether this session is recorded. And also there are some sound quality control. But I would like to point out what I feel like my subjective experience in teaching on this platform is actually more of what I can do outside of the teaching application that's in here. You can see this is a screenshot of the session while I was doing the teaching. And you can see that there's a teaching management portal where I can keep records of the students to put down, to keep a progress of how they're doing with their homework. And there's also the teacher's reference tool in which that I can quickly reference to things that I need or resources that I can draw from instantly while I'm teaching the class without the student know that what I'm doing. So outside of the teaching software, there's a whole grade of resources that I can take advantage of. So what's more interesting here is that I set up a camera in order to study this phenomenon. I set up a camera to record myself during the teaching session. I have like hours and hours of recording, and so that I can observe what is actually going on while myself was focusing on teaching. And I find out that in the eco-social system, besides all the materials that I've been showing to the students in this online platform, there are other important things going on in the environments that is usually neglected while we were looking at this issue. So we have to talk about the technology, like the wireless technology, the Wi-Fi that supports the teaching, and my wireless like earphone to make me feel comfortable. Like sometimes I can walk around the room so that I don't sit in the chair all the time. The computer displays have two of them. One is for displaying the contents to the students and chat with the students. And the other computer screen that I utilized is that I use it for recording, for reference, for checking. And sometimes I also get distracted on my second computer screen as well. And I realized that in the teaching session, I also use this my cell phone from time to time, also for reference checking or communicating with the school administration regarding this teaching session, or communicating about information regarding the students as well. And of course, the cell phone can be a distraction sometimes when I received a message from a friend asking me when can I finish and go to dinner with him or her. So that's what is going on in this thing. And also I have printed books and resources besides. So sometimes that I will quickly look up a question that I want to use in class. And also, when we move on and look at what is happening at different time scale, it's not only that is happening in real time while I was teaching that matters the learning and teaching processes. There are other important things. So many other processes happening at different time scale is affecting or contributing to the online teaching and learning process, such as liking the student's post or establish a supportive teacher-student relationships through maybe social network exchanges, and also through like the process of checking students' homework and offering feedback, or even read information about the students before the class, that is before the start of the class, so that I can get a better understanding of what's going on with the students. And also adaptations to the material constraints in meaning making. Like, for example, because I don't see the student's face and student don't see me, I feel, so I observe myself like have been always playing with the tones and intonations to try to engage the student a bit more. Otherwise, the students will be only just reading the PowerPoints that I show. So I feel like myself doing that a lot naturally. So when we try to generalize what is going on in this online or digital spaces, we find that it is an eco-social system of online language teaching, that the teacher has a lot of things going on, a lot of things that the teacher can actually utilize to make meaning. And it's also putting on constraints on what the teacher can do. The teacher have prior pedagogical knowledge about how to teach language, and some pre-class informations about the students that the teacher want to make use of in order to establish a more trustworthy relationship with the students, because as I said, we don't even see each other in this online space. And as I said, the changes voice, social media changes, it creates like a sustained frame of learning in front of the students at a different time scale for a long period of time during the course. And then I would like also to discuss one important moment that I feel like worth noticing. It is that you can see from this, you can see the teacher said, okay, reading part is, the student said, the teacher said, okay, reading part is not confident, okay? So it's a situation like this. I am the speaking teacher for the students, and however, the students would like to discuss some thing about his reading, which by the school policy, I'm not supposed to discuss with the students, because we don't want to have conflicting information between teachers, like the information we give to the students. So in this situation, I feel like by not showing my facial expressions of myself while keeping the same voice that sounds really nice, I successfully hide part of my emotion from the students, which may not be possible had this happens in a face-to-face session. So the limitations that the students cannot see the teacher or the presenter has become, the presenter has actually become a valuable semiotic resources as well, to avoid making the social meanings that can cause problems in this specific teaching session. So this freedom allowed by the online teaching scenario, or this setup, is very important part that made this session actually possible. So when we generalize what is happening here, we can take a close look at what is behind the thing. From this figure, the specific incidents that occurred is made obvious, and many different processes happenings are involved in this incident. Though that not all of the processes directly matters the ongoing teaching, they influence the class in different ways. So on the surface, the semiotic resources involved seems to be very limiting. In this case, it's just the PowerPoint, the presentation, plus the teacher's voice. The specific setting actually allow the teacher enough freedom to more actively control the social meaning that's being passed on to the students. And it is also worth noticing that the material, the technology have both affordances. For example, in enabling and maintaining the teaching activity, they also have constraints. And for example, the teacher can get maybe annoyed at an unreliable internet connections that keeps dropping, or resulting in the need to frequently repeat, the teacher need to repeat in that scenario, or a teacher can get very tired of a very uncomfortable chair that he needs to sit there for a long time. So also the online teaching indefinitely has important social aspect, though the technologically mediated meaning making, the teacher will need to establish trust with the students, and also will also be constrained by the societal and social connections. For example, as I said, the teacher needs to obey the rules set up by the school, or to guide the communication between different teachers, even though I have never met or see the other teachers of the students in this scenario as well. So to put some discussions in here, I think it is important that by analyzing from the teacher's perspective, it is then not difficult to imagine the aspects of sociality in the online teaching should not be overlooked in the eco-social system of online teaching. And also the material and the technological, such as computer, internet connections, the affordances and the constraints also affect the teaching and the learning processes, and also the emotional well-being of the teacher and the students as well. So for this study, I have been carrying on this study for a while. So at first I look at the whole picture, and then more specifically recently, we take a look at the specific translanguaging and trans-semiotizing processes within this online teaching session. So that's pretty much for the talk today, but the study is actually a going on study. We focus on different aspects of this teaching phenomenon. So I guess that's pretty much for the talk for today. And thank you very much.
So much. Thank you, Angel and Qinghua. That was wonderful. Very interesting. We'll go next with Enrica Piccardo.
So, hi everybody, and thank you for this invitation. My talk is about languaging through an online plurilingual action-oriented scenarios, and the focusing on the teacher's side, the teacher's perception and involvement. And it's connected to a study we are conducting now, funded by SHERC. So, sorry. So if we look at our culturally and linguistically plural society, we see that they really call for a new vision. For us to get out from the language myth, what somebody calls the language myth, the idea of a language as a fixed code, an inventory of determinately identifiable linguistic units, with each of which correlates a form with a meaning or meanings, moving from that to an integrational view of language, which is considered a cultural construct, a second-order cultural construct, which by nature is open-ended and incomplete, and arises out of the first-order activity of making and interpreting linguistic signs. And it is at the same time the product of a collective mind and distributed cognition. So if we move in this direction, we see increasingly language as an activity, something that we do, but something that we don't do alone, we do together, and this is even more important. Language is first and foremost a dialogical and intersubjective activity, is an activity that allows us to coordinate actions, perceptions, and attitudes, share experiences and plans, and to construct and maintain complex social relations on different time scales. We've seen an example in the previous presentation of what Fusaroli and colleague say and how they define language. So learning this language is a process, and it's a process rooted in reality. Because if we consider learning, all learning, but of course we are focusing on languages, so we're more interested in that, we see that individuals make experiences and are in contact with other individuals, and this defines their identity. They are more and more aware of their competencies, knowledge, and they use it for social action. And in turn, this social action gives a feedback that helps them advance in constructing their own competencies and knowledge. So, il s'agit de faire quelque chose pour apprendre et non pas d'apprendre pour faire quelque chose. So you have to do something to learn and not vice versa. With this philosophy in mind, we enter an idea where languages, human beings, and their repertoires can be considered are complex adaptive systems, and each complex adaptive system is involved in iterative processes of development. So, les individus s'engagent dans une activité complexe, intersubjective, que l'on appelle langue. Individuals engage in a complex intersubjective activity called languaging, and which has been translated as langagier in French in some publications. So the classroom and any other social space is a space of collective knowledge and shared understanding, shared comprehension. Let's have a look at let's have a look here at this a bit more in general terms, in theoretical terms. So what is a system? If we adopt this systemic view, we see different embedded systems. A system has been defined by Larson, Freeman, and Tadeva as a collective whole made up of heterogeneous constituents, which are interdependent. So we have a system society. Societies are systems where, as I said at the beginning, there is increasing social mobility and linguistic and cultural diversity. There is a flow of lingua culture across the national boundaries. Then there is an embedded system, which is individuals who have their own life trajectories and language biography. And the language biography also is dynamic because it unfolds naturally as one progresses through life, something that is influenced by events, contexts, experiences, everything that characterizes our human being, a life existence as human being. Then we have language, which is by itself, in itself, a system, which is cognitively developed and socially constructed at the level of the individual. And if we go to what interests us, the language acquisition, we can define it as a situated practice because learning happens by having this active role in tasks that are shaped collectively and dynamically in relation to virtual or real partners, and they require a mediation process all along. And finally, we have this smaller microcosm, which is the language class, another system where we really see a new role for language education in this move from language to languaging. And there we are making space for linguistic plurality and use increasingly multiple languages in the class. At the same time, raising awareness and teaching towards this awareness instead of just teaching towards one or two languages. And in the process, we support agency and mediation. So in our theoretical framework, which is shaped by complex dynamic system theory, we talk about situated learning, action, and affordances. And we see that the mind, body, and environment constitute a complex dynamic system. So the learning is rooted in situated dynamic learning situations. And it happens through perception in action, where the learner is seen as a social agent who perceives affordances and reacts to them by carrying out tasks and achieve a goal. So learning builds on this capacity precisely to perceive affordances as invitation to actions. And finally, when, in order to perceive these affordances, the learner needs to develop this agency, and basically all the experience are constructed through the mediation of action. So this is our theoretical framework, but it's pretty complex, not by chance. So how our guiding questions in the study are broader guiding questions are the idea of how can we embrace this complexity in language education? How can teachers be helped navigate this complexity and in turn guide learners towards a new perspective? And to what extent innovative pedagogical practices and approach can provide a support to deal with this complexity, and a teacher education on the longer term, how can it be reconceptualized to become a dynamic, never-ending process that opens to new worldview? So this is a bit the basis of a new approach that we're looking for. And the action-oriented approach has all these points: real-life tasks, communication, cognition, strategic view of competencies, affordances, and plurilingualism. So it's a move from a paradigm of linearity and simplification to a paradigm of complexity, focusing on competence, where we have the interaction and the interconnection of language, language user, language use, and the metacognitive, metalinguistic aspects. So in this approach, we see that the teaching and learning process is driven by action and framed by scenarios. What is a scenario? It's a blueprint for project which contains one or more culminating action-oriented tasks and has precise goals and create usually some form of artifact, which involves different semiotic codes, usually like pictures or graphics, etc. Here you have an example of a scenario that we have created in the project that fed this new one I'm going to present some data from, community cookbook. I'm not going to read it for reasons, but you see, if you have a look at that very quick, that it provides a frame. It provides the frame where you are going to work, and there is a precise demand, a precise request, and also what is expected from you, what will you create at the end, and how you will present. Each of these scenarios have been subdivided into different steps, because, as you can imagine, you don't get to such a complex culminating task in an hour or two. You need a path, you need a journey, and you need different steps that all contribute to for the students to be able to perform such a complex final task. The entire thing being a scenario. So using all the materials that we developed and a platform that we developed in the project Linked Dear Linguistic and Cultural Diversity Reinvented, we have embarked in a new project last year with a partnership with the region of Lombardy in Italy, which, as you may remember, has been the first hit by COVID-19 and in a very hard way. So the idea of how can we support the teachers who have to go online so quickly and suddenly, supporting online language teaching, not to go back to all the methodologies. So the idea to support teachers' effective implementation of collaborative, action-oriented online pedagogies, and to focus on the use of what we had created, the Light e-portfolio, which is part of Linked Dear, and action-oriented scenarios that we had previously created, see how we can, whether we can involve the students in learning environments where the students collaborate, have a collaborative learning and decision-making process, and they develop their strategy, their autonomy, and their agency. It is a mixed method research methodology where we are now in phase 5. We had a pre-intervention survey, very broad, given to a lot of teachers in the region of Lombardy, over 1,000, as you can see. Then we implemented the material with, of course, a much more limited number, about 80 teachers. And we had a post-intervention survey with 63 participants. And then we selected teachers also for semi-structured interviews. We have just finished, and we are preparing now a case study publication. So in the pre-intervention, what we noticed was that, yes, they used the teleconferencing tools and LMS, but there was a lack of social media integration, interactive learning programs, and personal sites and blogs. They used the audiovisual and grammar vocabulary worksheet, but there was a lack of student-produced resources. And the synchronous modality was there, but there was a lack of student-led project. In our post-intervention, we saw that the integration of the LMS and collaborative learning program and social platform was really taking up, like really moving further and existing. There was a lot of use of self-designing resources, plus those made in collaboration with others. And there was a hybrid modality. So not only the synchronous, but the students collaborated on projects also asynchronously. And I have some of the quotes from the teachers. So the teachers' feedback on plurilingualism, pluriculturalism, because these tasks were all done. We had 5 languages: English, French, Italian, Spanish, and German. Italian second language, of course. So see, the idea immediately what they perceived was that they saw the mother tongue as a plus, un valore aggiunto, something more. And then, but not just the languages of the heritage language, the immigration, but also the dialects became something important. Multiculturality was a very important point. And when they didn't have many students, that's this quote, they also used the variety of Italian cuisine, for example, Italian region as a different culture, or comparing different maps of different foreign cities and see what this happened. And the teacher said they were stimulated, I think, and I didn't know the meaning of every word. I was a student also. I was a student too. And finally, here we have, so it was really nice to see how this student, a Portuguese student who really wanted to have, also a Brazilian student who wanted to have the material in Portuguese, she also wanted to participate and translate it into the different languages. There was a feedback on action orientation. The action orientation means giving them a real task, something real. They had a target, they are an objective, a real task, more interesting, or the opportunity to be more active from the emotional point of view or involvement. And again, this idea of going through the language to translate from other languages that are not even studied in the class. And finally, also this idea that they worked on text in different languages, and they went from one language to the other and used other semiotic resources and shared the documents. Feedback on authenticity and inclusion. This is one of the most interesting part. In Italy, there is an integration in the classes of students with physical or other type of handicap, cognitive, and they had absolutely the possibility of working exactly with the other and like the other and help each other. Or in here it says the student with special needs really wanted to participate in the same part as all the others, and they did everything. And this for them was an opportunity to be more natural and use the foreign language with difficulty, but more naturally. And this is the last part. I like the most the involvement, the collaboration and awareness, the involvement of students, the collaboration, the reflection on their own way of learning. You have it here. And the awareness of the importance of experience. We don't have time, of course, to go into that, and this is my conclusion. So the scenarios, we can say that help teachers to consider the big picture, plan longer, coherent unit, not lessen, support and boost agency, increase inclusivity, and achieve a sense of confidence and empowerment for both, and also flexibly adapt across languages, proficiency level, and student range. And finally, they had the learner to be social agent, to be proud of their linguistic and cultural trajectories, and feel part of a community, and see the link between the classroom and the real world. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'd like to start off by, thanking you all for attending my talk. And I have some acknowledgements. I'd like to acknowledge the PI and co-PIs on this SSHRC-funded project. Maureen Kendrick is the PI and Margaret Early is a co-PI, and they're both at UBC. Saskia Van Vegan is another co-PI and she's at York, and I'm a co-PI at Western with Julie. I'm going to draw on one component of my part of this multi-phase, multi-site project in the second part of this talk. One of the goals of our project was to develop innovative pedagogical practices to support youth refugees by engaging with their multimodal literacy practices. So this work lends itself well to the Symposium on Plural Pedagogical Approaches in Digital Spaces. I'd also like to acknowledge the digital and digital storytelling contributions of Dr. Bapajibi's Babondan and my doctoral candidates, Wenmin Liang and Shaden Atia, as well as teacher candidate Rachel Wolgamud, who also contributed greatly to the project that I'll share with you. So just to give you an overview, I start by providing the background, rationale, and some key notions for the study. And then I wind up with some brief concluding remarks. So starting with the background, rationale, and key notions. To explain why plural pedagogical approaches are needed, along with counter narratives to respond to learners' real world problems, I touch on mono deficit views versus plural funds of knowledge perspectives, problematizing the dominant narrative, the role of 4.0 technology in addressing real world problems, how students are represented in their socio-educational surroundings, and a case in point, Dura Ingen. So you're going to have a little Danish today. Beginning with Moll and Gonzalez's notion of funds of knowledge, they urge teachers to get to know learners, their families, and their communities to be able to begin with their students where they are. This approach runs counter to assuming that marginalized children, especially ones from minoritized language backgrounds, enter classrooms lacking in the prior knowledge needed to do school. They explain how children do not arrive at the schoolhouse door with no prior skills. Rather, their parents and communities have provided them with life strategies and context-specific linguistic, cultural, and symbolic capital. And as you'll see later, Moll and Gonzalez's notion of funds of knowledge meshes well with the European Center for Modern Languages' current work on developing teacher competencies for pluralistic approaches. Linda Tuhiwei Smith's work on colonized knowledge highlights the need for decolonized writing to counter meta-narratives or representatives presented as regimes of truth that were interwoven into curriculum, including in texts that learners from Aboriginal backgrounds used to read about themselves, texts that were so damaging that they hurt their spirit. Smith called on learners from Aboriginal backgrounds to write their own stories to present and represent alternative knowledge. She refers to this process as rewriting the Aboriginal meta-narrative and decolonized writing. The notion aligns well with Molly Gonzalez's Funds of Knowledge work, and they both advocate for plural rather than mono-deficit views. Lorente argues that knowledge production must relate to real-world problems in specific contexts that require alternate frames of reference to be understood and resolved. Just as Smith advocates for decolonized writing for Aboriginal learners, Lorente argues for context-specific initiatives to meet migrant learners' needs in mainstream educational settings. She encourages educators to adopt digital initiatives that draw on learners' funds of knowledge, although she doesn't mention funds of knowledge per se. Lorente observes that even with the access that many educators have to 4.0 technology today, that is technology with the capability to link people and information through digital supports, those kinds of initiatives meet resistance and are underexplored. And as this symposium shows, there is a need for more emphasis on developing plural pedagogical approaches in digital spaces. So to answer the question of why plural pedagogical approaches, they are needed to counter the damaging effects of devaluing marginalized learners' funds of knowledge, the damage done by the dominant narrative, and a certain inertia in terms of accessing digital supports to link people and information. Another reason was already highlighted some decades ago, even though the digital component would have seemed like Star Wars back then. I'm referring to a psychoeducational report written by two Danish school psychologists, and there's a reason for shifting to Denmark, as I'll explain soon. So this is a book that was a study that was called Du Ingen, and it represents a study. The research revealed that minoritized children in Denmark believed that they were the way they saw themselves represented in their surroundings. And the message that they were getting from television, school, was that they were lacking or defective. And the study described in the report showed that when they, due to their interpretation of dominant social discourses, the curriculum, they believed that they were their mirror image or spejlbillede, that they believed what they were seeing outside that was reflected back to them was true. And their sense of identity was tied to their educational experiences and how they saw themselves reflected. Many of them internalized the negative image of themselves, hence the title of the report, Du Ingen, which means you are nobody. And that was how they understood it. So hvis nogen spørger mig, hvor jeg kommer fra, så siger jeg bare, at det ved jeg snart heller ikke. So if somebody asks me where I come from, soon I'll say that I don't really know either, because they were just losing their sense of themselves. Several recommendations that came out of the report included creating an educational setting in which minoritized language children saw their backgrounds reflected back to them in a positive light, so they could recognize themselves in it and feel secure, valuable, and worthy of respect. And you may see this as foreshadowing for something that sounds more familiar, that is more recent. And heightening all children's intercultural understanding and developing minoritized children's multiliteracy in their home language, the language of schooling, and a foreign language, for example, English, during this regular school day. These recommendations were all met in the bilingual bicultural program that resulted from this study, and that ended up being the program that I investigated for my thesis, which is why this study is so meaningful to me. One can only wonder what the program would have looked like if they had had digital affordances at that time, what sorts of plurilingual spaces they could have created, and what sorts of plural pedagogical approaches they could have implemented. So now turning to part 2 of my talk, I look at different attempts to implement plurilingual digital spaces through multimodality broadly, and 2 specific multimodal approaches and different pedagogical spaces, teacher education, and materials development. So looking at multimodality, traditional communication theories focus on how language communicates meaning. Multimodality provides a lens for analyzing how meaning is made through multiple modes and media to represent communication in learning environments. Students can create innovative multimodal products based on subjects like their lives and interests, and instructors can make space for them to draw on multimodal resources to represent their lived experience. So the foreshadowing. Identity text. So these are multimodal products developed by learners that affirm their identities, contrary to Duer Ingen, that affirm their identities as intelligent, imaginative, and linguistically talented, and increase their awareness of the relationships between their home language and school language. And the goal of an identity text is to shine a positive light on a learner to avoid learners feeling as though they are lacking or defective or Ingen. One approach to identity texts is through digital storytelling. And that would also be a way of addressing Smith's call for rewriting the master narrative. The Lotherington study referred to here was from 2011, and you see the programs that were used, but in a 2020 update, there are also programs such as Techno House videos and telling emotive stories. So how can you create these digital spaces? One way is the ECML project on developing teacher competencies for pluralistic approaches, and then one aspect of our SHIRK project. So initially, this was going to be a totally bilingual talk, but this is sort of the vestige of the French component of the talk. ECML, the European Centre for Modern Languages, which is part of the Council of Europe, is developing, it has a project on developing teacher competencies for pluralistic approaches. And luckily, I was selected to take part in a workshop that was held in Graz at the end of September. Unfortunately, I just went there digitally. And the one dimension that really struck me, particularly in light of the Duer Ingen study that I outlined, was this dimension 1, which deals with diversity, education, society, and plurilingual approaches. And on the one hand, it's so uplifting that this is a key focus. On the other hand, the Duer Ingen study came out in the 1980s, and we're 4 decades later, and we aren't quite there yet in terms of these plurilingual approaches. So finally, our study, we were working with youth refugees at the post-secondary level, as well as their educators and coordinators. Phase 1 primarily focused on the institutions and on the educators. Phase 2, student surveys and interviews and developing multimodal products. And phase 3, when we have more multimodal projects, will be the digital showcase. And so some of the products that they could choose from and that the team members developed samples of were multilingual books. They used Blogster, Pechakucha, and material memory videos, personal websites, digital resumes, and all of this for the participants to be able to express their lives and also their journey from having been a refugee and settling. So the multimodality informed phase 2 because they could include photographs, art, video, etc., similarly as has been described with regard to identity texts. And the goal of this materials development phase was to explore meaning representations and affordances through these multimodal resources and develop scaffolds. So ideally, if this works, I'm going to show you a video. One of the videos that we developed, sample videos, both how-to videos, because you can't just sort of tell somebody to go develop a movie. So we talked about, storyboarding and also the technology. This one is for the youth refugees, and it deals with resilience. So from an adult level, the next one, we also started looking at them for children who were learning French as a second language, and really started taking advantage of the different linguistic affordances. So there's the equivalent one for this one is in French, also with Arabic subtitles, but we discovered, and the point of showing these is that we discovered that with captions, you can just do every sort of language, and that this is something that's available to all teachers and students, and that, really when teachers discuss the difficulty of how could they do something if there's students from 25 different language groups in their classrooms, that they're blocked, that they can't give equal attention to all of the students' languages if they just know Spanish and English, or French or English, or something like that. And we just, we had so much fun with these captions this summer that, really that's not, that's not a problem. So I'll just go, if I can, to the final slide. Okay. So I'm sorry, I would have liked to have shown you those. So in terms of concluding remarks, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Deficit narratives are still prevalent. And digital storytelling can combat deficit narratives. It can combat deficit narratives by broadening conceptions of literacy and ways of knowing and being, and then lower barriers to success. Multimodal products represent counter-narratives. The body of counter-narratives has the potential to promote equity, and minoritized language speakers writing their unique experience as expert sources of knowledge and as decolonized writing. So, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Muito obrigada. Meu nome é Angelica Galante, eu sou professora de Educação de Língua na McGill University, e hoje eu vou falar um pouco sobre enacting plurilingual pedagogy in digital spaces and in different languages. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the lands and waters of Jyotiage, where I am located, and I would encourage you to acknowledge the indigenous lands in your contexts as well. Um pouco de mim mesma, eu sou brasileira, com herança espanhola e italiana por parte dos meus avós maternos e paternos. I was a settler in Brazil, and I am a settler in Canada. I immigrated to Canada in 2009. It's been quite a while now, when I was an international student. And for the first time, I felt like I was in a linguistic cage trying to conform to the norms, especially APA norms of graduate school, where people expected that I would behave in a very monolingual standard to the white native speaker here in Canada. I identify myself as a plurilingual, multilingual educator and researcher, e como qualquer pessoa plurilingue, eu tenho algumas línguas no meu repertório, mesmo que elas não tenham o mesmo nível de proficiência. My own repertoire and my lived experiences are important as they enable me to reflect on the languages, the cultures, and the power dynamics that we have to confront on the day-to-day basis. It's not a coincidence that I chose to conduct research on pedagogies in the multi-plural turn in applied linguistics. Now, the multi-plural turn requires an inclusive way of thinking about the concept of language. The turn places emphasis on individuals' repertoires, and the repertoires are interconnected between languages, semiotic resources, varieties, multimodalities, not as separate, but as integrated and fluid. Much research has been conducted on the effects of monolingual ideologies on the practice of plurilingual users. We have seen how monolingual policies, even if hidden, they permeate the minds of the language teachers, and they continue to influence how languages are taught in a one language manner only. We have seen that plurilinguals are subject to stereotypes, such as at risk or needing remedial support. And we have seen that teacher education on plurilingual pedagogy can be a means to confront the monolingual and monocultural orientations towards language teaching. Now, it's beyond the scope of this presentation to talk about all types of plural approaches, trans-semiotization, translanguaging, plurilingualism, but in the spirit of plurality and regardless of which approach we necessarily choose, here I chose plurilingual approaches. And by plurilingual approaches, I use plurilingualism here as an umbrella term that encompasses several practices such as languaging, translanguaging, cross-linguistic approaches, translation, pluraliteracies, etc. Now I'm going to talk about two studies in different settings that used these plurilingual approaches, one in TESOL education program in Montreal in Canada, and another one with an NGO in São Paulo in Brazil. So study number one is called Plurilingual Shift Project. It involved pre-service TESOL teachers in Montreal, and here we still use TESOL, teaching English as a second language, because of the context. The teachers received teacher education on plurilingual pedagogies and developed lesson plans and taught them in ESL classes in Montreal schools. This study wouldn't have been possible without the support received from the Fonds de Recherche du Québec Écoute, and also the wonderful participants, research assistants that I had, who are all multilingual as well, and they were key in the development of the materials. Now, one of the main questions that I hear when talking about plural approaches here in Quebec is, oh, but we can't do this in Quebec because of the monolingual language policies. As if Quebec was the only place that had monolingual language policies. So we know that even in Canada, while we have bilingual, officially bilingual policies, the provinces somewhat still operate in a monolingual manner, and other countries as well. So this statement often comes from teachers who have been in the field for quite a while, but not necessarily from novice teachers, which is interesting. So we know that Quebec sure has, it's a province that has officially French-only language policies, but it has, Montreal in particular has over 150 languages. And in 2016, 59% of the population in Montreal were born outside of Canada or had immigrant parents. And we know that as a result, they bring their languages and cultures to the context as well. Now, the background here, there were 22 pre-service ESL teachers. They were attending a fourth-year teaching methods course of a B.Ed program at McGill University, taught by me. All participants reported a minimum of 3 languages in their repertoire, which is nothing new here. Most people that I teach have 3 or more languages. The course was delivered through Zoom and also VoiceThread, and the goal was to investigate the pre-service teachers' openness to plurilingual pedagogy and potential challenges during the implementation. So just to give you an idea, they had this course, and then after the course, they would go into the field to teach And then I gathered data to find out how it went after implementation. So something that is important about Quebec, this document supports the reference framework for professional competencies. It supports teachers' competencies, and some of the competencies they have to develop while they are in the teacher education program. So this is a new document that was, the document is not new, but this updated document was just published in 2021. And I was very happy to see how it addresses that it's necessary for teachers to learn how to teach in general, teach any course in this increased linguistic and cultural diverse setting, integrating indigenous knowledges and perspectives, increasing the use of digital technologies. And this actually was published right now during the COVID pandemic. So it's very timely. So how we supported pre-service teachers, we created video tutorials. We focused on 5 plurilingual strategies. Then we had Zoom discussions in breakout rooms, voice thread for weekly synchronous discussions, and they were assigned test templates. They completed 2 with plurilingual approaches as well. So if you'd like to take a look at the plurilingual strategies, you can go to this YouTube playlist called Plurilingual Strategies in the Language Classroom, and you see the 5 strategies here. The first one was cross-linguistic analysis, cross-cultural comparisons, translanguaging, translation as mediation, and pluraliteracy. So the teachers would watch these very short video tutorials, and they would gain some inspiration so that they could develop their own tasks for their own courses. So this is only one example of a group that included pluriliteracies in their tasks. So they use materials in languages other than English, for example, YouTube videos in different languages with their students. And the students would create plurilingual posters, making use of images, sounds, and the body to convey meaning. The task template was divided into 4 areas: context, student, population, description of the task, the artifacts that students would be producing, and the plurilingual, pluricultural strategies used. But something I'd like you to take a look at is how this, the context and student population was something that was very new for the teacher candidates, because many of them reported that it was the first time they actually thought about the diversity in their own classes. So this one, for example, talked about a multicultural group such as Syrian, Algerian, Moroccan, and Haitian in their own classes. None of these students belong to the white Canadian population. This class has French as their 2nd, 3rd, or 4th language. So again, these are students taking ESL classes in a French-speaking school. So it's in French-speaking regular school here. So some of the main results, the pre-service teachers showed much excitement about the notion of their repertoire. The digital discussions challenged normalized discourses typically used in Quebec schools and policies. For example, just saying bilingual instead of French-English bilingual, for example, as we have many types of bilingualisms. The term allophone and Quebecois. Pre-service teachers also reported that the task template required a reflection on linguistic, cultural, and racial representation, or lack thereof, in their own materials. Now, the challenges, some pre-service teachers talked about their in-class supervisors. They were working with an in-service teacher. So sometimes the teacher would ask them to use English only in their classrooms. So what they were trying to apply a plurilingual strategy that they learned in their teacher education program. When they had to do their practicum, the in-service teacher would block them from doing that. So this shows the power dynamics between pre-service teachers and school supervisors as another challenge. So this shows also the need to engage school principals and more experienced teachers also in teacher education. The results of this study motivated me to develop another study where I would involve more people, not only teacher education, but also in-service teachers and other stakeholders. So this study number 2, is called Plural Digit Project. It was developed in an NGO in São Paulo, Brazil, with 12 in-service teachers, teachers of English, Spanish, French, and Arabic. There were 102 students who participated, Teachers received workshops on plurilingual practices. They implemented 5 bi-weekly pluridigit tasks. This study was funded by SHIRK, and we have my research team here who is very multilingual and multicultural. And you will see that there are 2 people from Abraço Cultural, the NGO, that were collaborators. So they were the pedagogical coordinators of the NGO. Well, São Paulo is a very multilingual city as well. English is often the language taught in schools in Brazil for years. Very similar to Canada, people spend 10 years in school trying to learn English and they don't learn past the verb to be. So I sometimes draw parallel to English and French here, sometimes in FSL classes outside of Quebec. Only 10% of adults between 18 and 24 years old say they have some basic knowledge of English. And languages other than English are rarely, if at all, taught in schools. So just to give you an idea that this NGO is really not what the norm is across the country. The NGO, Abraço Cultural São Paulo, has language programs in 4 languages. All the teachers who teach there come from an immigrant or refugee background, and they teach the languages that they know. Some of them don't know Portuguese, which is the language of the country, and they are learning Portuguese, but at the same time, they are teaching the languages that they have in their repertoire. Some of them teach their native language, but others teach their second language or third language. Some teachers teach 2 languages. The materials that they use are prepared by an in-house group of pedagogical coordinators. And one important component that they have is topics of social justice and intercultural communication. The courses we worked with a total of 14 courses from basic to intermediate levels. The pluridigit tasks complemented the synchronous classes, and they were hosted in the VoiceThread platform. So the teachers were not using only the pluridigit tasks. They were teaching via Zoom, and the pluridigit tasks complemented the course that they have. So we developed a total of 70 tasks for these courses, and each course had 5 pluridigit tasks. We collected 5 types of data collection here, but we're going to focus on 2, plurilingual pluricultural identity questionnaire with students at time 1 and time 2 during the course, at the beginning and at the end, and semi-structured interviews with all teachers. Importantly, of course, this was done also during COVID-19, and all the tools to collect data were done online. So we used Lime Survey, Zoom, and VoiceThread. Here's an overview of the tasks that we included. So we collaborated with pedagogical coordinators and the teachers to design the tasks. So it wasn't something that we created and we gave it to the teachers. So it was a conversation. Each research assistant was working with 2 or 3 teachers. And again, in this collaboration, the collaboration was done in many languages, not only in English, sometimes in Portuguese, sometimes in Spanish, sometimes in Arabic. Sometimes in French. Each task had 3 steps, which were clearly explained to the students by the research assistants, and you can see their videos here. So they were talking about what students had to do. We engaged the tasks with critical topics such as racism, migration, COVID-related issues that built upon knowledge learned in class. And then on VoiceThread, students had to include all the knowledge they had learned in class. So they would post audio, video files, and they could use the target language, but also other languages that they had in their repertoire. The process of recording audio and video posts contributed to students' investment in their language learning, especially during COVID-19. Brazil was hit very hard by the pandemic, and they had, it was a real hit on the emotional level of the students. So some of them even said that it was a great way to connect to other people and to kind of get distracted a little bit for their mental health. And at the end of the task, the goals were presented. So instead of giving students feedback on terms of correction, what to do, what they did well, what they didn't do well. We focus on a more holistic feedback, saying what they were able to accomplish by the end of the task. So rather than saying what they couldn't do, we focus on what they could do. So the main benefits of this project, using the teachers' voices here, one of the teachers said it was like an abanico, opening paths for inquiry. So it was pluridigit es como una apertura de un abanico, hay como un abanico que se abre. Por ejemplo, tuvimos con un tema que apareció en el comienzo sobre las lenguas indígenas, uno de los primeros, no sabes, todo duró para mucha pesquisa. And it was very provechoso. So one of the things that we found that was very interesting is that the teacher said that the topics themselves created a lot of research and inquiry among students and teachers as well. Teachers also reported that the Pluridigit project engaged the students in their repertoire through embodiment, so using gestures. Taught that one of the students was talking about an artist, and they had a poster of the artist, so they were like pointing at the artist, showing pictures, using the gestures when they kind of didn't remember one word or another. Another teacher talked about how they were building voz con todos. So she also said that the topics of indigenous languages, one of the topics of the tasks, kind of made them reflect about how can we talk about indigenous languages and decolonization and expect that the students speak like a native speaker at the same time. So in a way, it made them reflect, the topics made them reflect about their own native idea of language, which was a good one because it was kind of a contradicting and making them reflect about this. And finally, agency, learners taking control of their own learning. Many teachers talked about students who were repeating their posts several times before, repeating the recording several times before posting because they really wanted the recording to be good to the research assistants and other students who were in the voice thread. This process actually enhanced their learning. So it was really amazing, according to one of the teachers. Plurilingual pluricultural identity, just to close the talk here, the results show that at time 1, 88% of the students reported having a plurilingual pluricultural identity, which was quite high already. But at time 2, 100% of the students reported having plurilingual pluricultural identity. So these results show that the students' monolingual biases may have been challenged as a result of the project. So to conclude, teacher education in plurilingual pedagogy can challenge the monolingual ideology, but it may not be enough for its enactment, depending on the context. So support from school stakeholders is necessary. Results of the project as well can inform decolonization in language education in Canada and similar colonial contexts. And COVID-19 has exacerbated our reliance on technology. So moving forward, we can continue to take advantage of these technologies, especially the ones that engage students' agency to use their repertoire. Muito obrigada, muchas gracias, grazie, merci beaucoup. Thanks to all team members and participants in the research, and thanks to ACLA for hosting this symposium. If you'd like to have more info about the projects, you can type plurilingual shift or pluridigit on Google and it will show up. So thank you so much.